by Professor Jens Rainer-Ohm from Aachen University, and it's my pleasure to introduce him briefly. Jens Rainer-Ohm is full professor and chair of the Institute of Communication Engineering at Aachen University in Germany. His research and teaching interests cover image coding, video coding, motion compensated, stereoscopic and 3D image processing, also multimedia content analysis, signal processing, transmission, and other topics of digital communication. Since 1998, he is with the ISO-IC Moving Picture Experts Group, well-known MPEG, where he has been contributing to MPEG-4 and MPEG-7 standards. He is chair of the MPEG video subgroup since May 2002, and together with Gary Sullivan of Microsoft, he has been co-chairing the joint video team of both ISO and ITOT, and he's again co-chairing together with Gary the succeeding joint collaborative team on video coding with the intended mandate of developing the next generation of high-efficiency video coding technology. So please.
Thank you for the introduction, Dietmar. How much time do I have? 35 minutes? Okay. I want to give you a quick overview about what's happening in the newest series of international video compression standards. I will go to some technical detail, maybe not to everything that is actually written on the slides, but I can point you to this magazine that all of you have in your conference materials, which contains a paper about HEVC, also with quite some technical detail. It's a little bit outdated as it refers to an older version, and things are developing. But I think it's very good to give you an overview about what HEVC is about. So here's a quick outline of my talk. I would like to start with some motivation and then go into some current stages of development. I would like to highlight our current assessment of performance a little bit later in the talk. So what's the motivation? I think when you go around an ether, you will notice that things are going beyond HD. So video is increasing our resolution, and so we need more pixels per second, and we need more bits per second, etc. I recently heard a presentation by some network guy who talked about that they are expecting, at least in the mobile area, the bandwidth crunch during the next 2 or 3 years due to the increasing traffic of video, and they don't want to know what to do about it. So I told him I have the solution, because HEVC is appearing and it will at least delay your bandwidth crunch for another 2 years. But so I think it's a clear indicator that more compression is urgently needed, and that means more compression than what we have now, which is advanced video coding, also known as H.264 standard. And so that's the reason why we started this work. This work is again done jointly by ITOT and ISO-IAC. A new team was formed to do that. It's the name of the team is a little bit of pleonasm. It's joint and collaborative and team. All that says we work together. But nevertheless, we have installed this team more than 2 years ago now, and the name of the standard that is jointly developed is high efficiency video coding, as also the title is saying. Here's some more information that you could access it. The website where all the JCT documents are available, and you will certainly find it if you look on Google. So here you can see some of the history. We have already had 10 meetings now. The most intense meeting was the 7th meeting last November, where we had more than 1,000 input documents processed in around 10 days of meeting. Very intense work. Many technical contributions. And it has decreased a little bit, but somehow it's stabilizing, and I will tell you a little bit later what we are intending to do next, so it will certainly go up again. some important milestones. We had the evaluation of the corporate proposals in the first meeting in April 2010. Out of that, we defined what we call the test model under configuration, sometimes also known as TMAC, if you hear that name. That was a first software code base for experimentation on HEVC, and already 2 meetings later, we came up with a first working draft and test model out of that. That took up the best technologies out of a few proposals. And so the next milestones, at least from the ISO-IEC, were the committee draft in February of this year. Just 2 months, or less than 2 months ago, we had the draft international standards on the ISO side, and the plan is to have the first version of HEVC released both on ISO-IEC and RWTH side in January 2010. So after that, you will have the standard in a stabilized way available. Some overview about the current design. The high-level design is quite similar to HEVC, but some things are done a little bit more elegant. We have more possible non-unit types. Non-unit types are a scarce resource, and we are eventually running out of non-unit types already in HEVC. There are some more well done, I would say, mechanisms for random access and splicing support. If you want to switch bit streams, for example, then it was possible in HEVC. There are some parameter sets beyond the well-known sequence and picture parameter sets of HEVC. We have something that is called video parameter set that allows a little bit more elegant ways of making compatible extensions of the standard, for example, extensions for scalability, where part of the bitstream shall be interpreted by an old device. It was sometimes a little bit of a nightmare in HEVC, and I hope they are very better now. And what is most remarkable, I will go to some technical detail on that later. There are several things that are supporting parallel processing. Parallel processing is what you need to do today in video, and that really could make HEVC devices run faster than HEVC. The overall design is very well known. Could almost take that as a block diagram of any video compression standard since H.261. It's what we call hybrid coding, motion compensation, and alternatively intra-frame prediction. So you can either predict from a different picture or from the same picture. But all of that is a prediction that is subtracted from the actual picture, and then you take the residual, you make a transform, and encode the transform by entropy coding. Of course, after quantization, you reconstruct, and then you do the same again. That's in principle the old story. What is different here is this word. This picture is split into what we call coding tree blocks. Coding tree blocks are larger regions of a picture than the traditional macro blocks 16 by 16 that all the previous standards had. Also, the transform is allowing larger sizes now. And all of these blocks are a bit better optimized and crunching out the last redundancy out of the information that we have. This is, I would say, one of the major new things of the standard. It's a structure we call coding tree blocks. The coding tree block is 64 by 64 unit of pixels in luma and corresponding smaller area in chroma. And this can further recursively be split by a quadtree-like structure into smaller, what's called coding units. The coding unit is taken together coding blocks are the luma and the chroma, and all of them together form the coding unit, as well as we call the coding tree unit, the combination of the coding tree blocks of all of them. But virtually all of them are having the same tree structure. It would be, at least for YCBCR 420, as we are currently doing, it would be overkill to have different tree structures for lunar and chrono components. And then what you have here at the smallest squares are the so-called coding units. Coding units can become as small as 8 by 8. And attached to the coding units are two things. Transform units, however, the transform units can split again. There can be a continuation of the tree specifically for the transform. And the other thing that is attached are prediction units and the corresponding prediction blocks. The principle also that is very old. Quad trees is a publication of 1984, I believe. Here's the way of how then the information is scanned in the CUs that belong to the coding tree unit. And what you see here are the types of prediction blocks for the, let's take it for the luma, that are attached to the coding block. So we can split the coding block into these subpartitions of prediction blocks, which then would come either with intra-prediction mode, or with motion vector, reference picture index, etc. You see here quite conventional things that were also available in HEVC. However, in HEVC there was only a possibility to do this below the 16 by 16 level. In principle, what you could have here is you can just keep the 64 by 64 unsplit. You can have the same motion vector for 64 by 64 region. That is, but you could go as small as so for interframe prediction we are allowing smallest size 4 by 8 and 8 by 4. We found that 4 by 4 is not really necessary for interframe. For intra-picture prediction, when you predict this from the same picture, you also need 4 by 4. We have also investigated smaller, but with the overhead information that we have, then it does not pay off. The lower row here are what we call asymmetric mode partitioning. Let's say if the coding block is size 16 by 16, we could have a subpartition into 12 by 16 and 4 by 16. Have two different motion vectors for it. That really gives something. That was about inter-picture prediction from a different picture. Now, if you don't find another reference picture that gives you a good prediction, you can try with this within the same picture. Already, advanced 3D coding did that with what we call directional prediction. You take the information from already decoded adjacent blocks and just propagate the boundary samples with a certain directional orientation into the current block. The difference here is that we allow much more directions. HEVC had 8, now we have 33. In addition to the 33, we have also something that was already available in HEVC. DC prediction, you just compute the mean value of the boundary samples and take that as a flat area. And we have another mode which is called planar prediction. You are interpolating a kind of surface that has a certain tilt and amplitude, and then can use this as a prediction. There are some more things, some smoothing of boundary samples, but I think that would be too much detail for now. I had talked about how conceptually partitioning is done in inter-picture prediction. Of course, you need to convey the information. Motion vectors, reference frame, reference picture indices, things like that. Also mode you can use unidirectional or Y prediction as traditionally in HEVC. So you take two reference pictures or take one reference picture. All that needs to be encoded and sent to the decoder. Also, with regard to that, with regard to motion and mode coding, much more sophisticated schemes are used here. We have the well-known skip mode, which is a little bit more improved, and we have a new merge mode. Merge means that you can inform the decoder that the current block uses the same motion vector that is already known for an adjacent block. For that, a series of 5 candidates is computed. 5 candidates can be spatial candidates, and in addition, 1 temporal candidates. And if those candidates that are shown here are not existing, the list is simply filled up with other reasonable candidates from other reference pictures, etc. Very much detail. I think I do not want to go into too much detail. What is then sent is just the index of the candidate. Something similar is done when actually the motion vector is new, and you need to encode a new motion vector. In the prediction of the motion vector, also several candidates are checked, and the 2 most promising candidates are then investigated, and the index of this most promising candidate upon which the difference of the motion vector then is computed, that is set. That makes it much more efficient than any other motion coding before. So, and what is in the merge mode, we also inherit the reference picture index, and also the mode is handled in a similar way. Transforms. The old standards either had an 8x8 transform, usually a DCT, until or before HEVC. Usually the DCT was not specified to full precision, it was usually assuming mathematical precision, which then needed to be implemented with some integer accuracy which could produce drift. Starting from HEVC, we had well-defined integer basis transforms. That is also done here, but we have different transform sizes. The smallest one is 4x4, and the largest one is 32x32. And of course, we don't have any lengths that we only have the dyadic series 4, 8, 16, 32. The transforms are almost orthogonal. They have almost same norms. It is not necessary to make scaling depending on the transform coefficient as it was in HEVC. And what is also very elegant is in this transform is that you can simply subsample the transform basis vectors of the 32x32 transform and get the 16x16 transform, and subsample it again and get the 8x8. So all the other transforms are inherently hidden in the larger transforms, which makes implementation in hardware certainly much more efficient. Quantization is very similar to HEVC. We have this logarithmic scale of quantization step size. If you increase the QP by 6, you have double quantization step size. Quantizer step size can be adapted at the CPU level. Some sophisticated coding mechanisms also for that. I think it's too much detail to go into that. And also frequency weighting is possible by quantization matrix, where we have investigated that and we found that for the larger transforms it's not really necessary to describe a quantization matrix for each transform coefficient. For 32x32 we just use an 8x8 quantization matrix, a different one than for the 8x8 transform, and simply one quantization step size is used for a group of 4 transform coefficients. Entropy coding, of course, after quantization we need to entropy code the transform coefficients. Of course, we also need to entropy code the motion vectors, the intramodes, etc. Much of that is done in context-based entropy coding. Unlike HEVC, HEVC is only using one single entropy coder, which is Kabak, which should be known from HEVC already, but it's not exactly the same Kabak. The core of the coding engine is the same, but several aspects have been further improved to make it better parallelizable, to reduce the number of contexts as much as possible, to avoid bottlenecks in the arithmetic coding engine, etc. And for the binarization, there are, I think, 5 types in total of binarization. And principle That's it about entropy coding. Maybe a little bit about coding of transform coefficients, because that, in case of high data rates, consumes the bulk of the bits. Still, the transform coefficients, if you go to the higher qualities, it's not the motion vectors, it's the transform coefficients. For low rates, it's the motion vectors eventually. But low rates, you don't have a problem with entropy coding bottlenecks. So, how are we managing all these different transform sizes? We go up to 32 by 32, I said, but in principle, the same way of entropy coding is used for any transform block size. This is done by subdividing the larger transform block size into 4 by 4 subblocks. And then the transform coefficients are encoded in groups of 4 by 4 coefficients. That means, for example, in the case of a 16 by 16 transform, you have 16 of these 4 by 4 subblocks. In the case of 8 by 8 transform, you have 4 of these subblocks. There are 3 different scans, where, however, the larger transform sizes, 16 and 32, only use one of them. I can proudly tell you that HEVC is the first video compression standard without a zigzag scan. The zigzag scan was found to be useless. What is used instead of that is this one. It's called diagonal upright scan. You just scan in one direction, you don't go back. It's really not necessary. You are establishing context for the encoding of the transform coefficient from the previous diagonal. It really doesn't matter whether you go this or that way. There's no difference. And simplifies. No zigzag scan anymore. In the case of 8 by 8 and 4 by 4, the subblocks can also use, because particularly not only in intra that is the case, in intra-coding it really makes sense to also allow horizontal and vertical scans, depending on the prediction direction. So if you have a horizontal prediction, you could expect that horizontal transform coefficients are more active and so on. And but the contexts are conceptually the same. You also take coefficients for getting the input to the probability of the entropy coder. You take coefficients from the previous scan row. That really makes the throughput of Kabak and the adaptation of the Kabak engine much more hardware friendly. Not taking the previous coefficient, taking some that came from the previous row that are already available for some time. Otherwise, we have the last position coded. We have a significance flag. That means you are looking for non-zero coefficients, and if there's a non-zero coefficient found, a significance flag is set. And once the significance flag is found, the sign is coded. There's a special mechanism which is called sign data hiding, which gives a little bit of benefit in terms of compression. And otherwise, the level is coded for the significant bits. If it's a relatively low level, larger 1, larger 2 are still coded with Kabak, and everything that is larger is simply a truncated rice code without feeding anything into the arithmetic coding engine. When I came to the block diagram, I forgot to mention one aspect of HEVC that makes it different or not different from previous video coders. Many video coders, starting from H.261, have operated a filter in the loop. H.261 just had a very primitive 1-to-1 filter, a low-pass filter. HEVC has a deblocking filter, which is very useful. Almost the same deblocking filter, a little bit more simple, is also used in HEVC. What means more simple? Deblocking in HEVC is not done on 4x4 grid of block boundaries. It's only done on 8x8 grid, even if there is a block partitioning into 4x4. It was found that actually visually that does not make any difference. you don't need to deblock the 4x4 block boundaries. Of course, this simplifies a lot, because you need to compute conditions only on a sparser grid of block boundaries. But otherwise, the concepts are a little bit very similar. I think there's one less threshold value, so also there is a slight simplification. But otherwise, it's a deblocking filter that takes into account quantization step size, appearance of transform coefficients, mode, if the mode is different between two adjacent blocks, etc. To take decisions how strong the deblocking should be. After the deblocking, there's another non-linear processing element, which is called sample adaptive offset. Sample adaptive offset is at its core a kind of amplitude lookup operation. It's a kind of lookup table where you can correct the amplitude of the reconstructed value. And now this is not done blindly. In order to know what to do, which value to take out of the lookup table, there's a kind of classification done for the current region. The encoder selects one type, which can either be non-edge type. Non-edge type means there's nothing done. One of these 4 edge types are the 4 edge orientations, horizontal, vertical, and the 2 diagonals. And there's another type which is called banding type. You know, banding artifacts are those where you, due to strong quantization, start to see some pseudo edges in flat areas usually. This is somehow managed by this sample adaptive offset. It has 2 effects. Visually, it is doing a kind of sharpening of edges without producing ringing, and it is preventing banding artifacts. And in order to do that, what is done, the encoder selects for the current region, which is in principle coding tree block area, selects one of these types. This is predominantly edges of that orientation, this predominantly flat area, here nothing is done. And then the lookup table is computed and transmitted by the encoder. That means the encoder, of course, knows what the target is and is able by this lookup table to make a better reconstruction. That actually also increases the PSNR and increases the visual quality. You may have heard, and if you look into this article, it's telling you that there's a third processing element called adaptive loop filter. Adaptive loop filter was investigated, but in the current specification we have not included it. It appeared to be a little bit too complex for the benefit it gave. Something about parallelism. I told you in the beginning that HEVC gives very good support for parallel operations. Firstly, we have the good old slice structure. So slice, I think I have a picture here. A slice is often used for packet-oriented transmission. You need to bundle data into a packet. So you fill up a packet until you have filled it with the bits up. Of course, the bits must relate to entities that are identifiable. In our case, always a full number of coded tree blocks or coded tree units goes into a slice. And so that means that a slice can consist of a variable number of coded tree units. And this is usually a synchronization point for packet-oriented transmission. Beyond that, we have a structure called tiles. Tiles, maybe you know this tile from JPEG 2000. These are larger rectangular areas that allow localized access to a picture. This is shown here. A tile is usually a rectangular area. It must not be the same tile size all over the picture. It can be somewhat variable. And tiles are also independently decodable, and that means you can use tiles for parallel processing, either at the encoder, or the encoder does also at the decoder, but usually the encoder is the one that is more challenging. And those tiles could also be used if you want, for localized access to picture. If you want to zoom in into a video, which may make sense in ultra-high resolution, you could do that. Beyond that, think about this delay is roughly 2 CTUs. So the dependency in terms of entropy coding adaptation would go that this CPU influences this one, and this one influences this one. That means with a small delay of CTUs, you can process rows of CTUs in parallel threads. That is the purpose of this wave-front parallel processing. It does not cost much in terms of coding efficiency. There are some more called entropy slices, called dependent slices, and they are for some more special applications. That should be sufficient for the technical overview. Of course, there are much more details. Constant has something, Benjamin, how much do we have? 250 pages? Maybe?
280 around.
So it's already quite some pages, but it should have given you some idea about what is done technically in order to achieve something more. But now, before I tell you what we have achieved so far, something about intended profiles and levels. What we are currently foreseeing for the first version of the standard is only one profile, which we are calling the main profile. This is, I think, a very good achievement. That would mean that for the first time we have a standard that for all applications in communication, in broadcast, in anything, storage, uses identical decoders, at least in terms of the coding tools. Coding tools are defined in profiles. And then, of course, you may want to build decoders that are able to process pictures of different resolutions, and for that we have levels. Currently we are planning 13 levels, which range from something like a little bit more than QSIP up to 8K or 4K. And within those levels, in some cases, for the upper 8 levels, we have something that is called tiers. Tier is a variant of the level, where tier 1 has lower bitrate and tier 2 has higher bitrate. So that it may mean that you want to build a decoder that is more for the consumer applications or more professional applications. Of course, the throughput of the entropy coder is something that really has something to do with complexity, and that is mainly the maximum bitrate throughput. That is managed by this construction tiers. Now something about performance. I have brought you here a number of results in terms of PSNR comparison, how much bitrate saving we have at the same PSNR. Those results, by the way, were provided by Heike Schwarz of HHI. They are coming from an upcoming publication. So in December there will be a special issue of the IEEE transactions on CSVT and HEVC. That includes an overview paper and a paper that makes assessment, and those graphs come from this assessment paper. What Heike really did not take some arbitrary codec. He tried to optimize other codecs like MPEG-2, like H.263, like AVC, as much as he could to the same level of optimization in terms of mode decision, in terms of motion estimation. I think he used the same motion estimation for all the codecs as he could. He really put some effort into that. And here's one example, interactive application, so that is more or less communications. What you see here is the gain, the red is the gain over different qualities, gain relative to AVC high profile. It's roughly 50% lower bitrate. What you see here is the gain relative to MPEG-4 advanced simple profile relative to H.262, also known as MPEG-2 video, the thing that is used in DVB1. And also here the gain relative to H.263 goes up to 80-90%. But this is for the interactive communication. Here's another one. quality. Here at the higher qualities a little bit less, but still around 40% compared to HEVC. Here's an entertainment application. This is a different configuration. The other configuration was low delay, so only one picture delay. Here we have larger delay, we have hierarchical B pictures. Of course, these give better compression performance, but also longer delay. This is something that would be used in broadcast or streaming. Here it goes from, again, at the lower qualities, but 35 dB is not really low quality. 5 minutes, that's 35 dB is not really low quality, and it goes down to something like 40. Again, much higher gain compared to the even older still, but what's really interesting is the gain compared to HEVC. And another example. By the way, here are the averages over a larger number of sequences. In terms of PSNR, 35%. Now what we did, we wanted to know whether PSNR gives us the whole picture. Oh, by the way, here is another thing. Thanks, by the way, to I think Detlef Marquez who did that and made this as an input to JCT. The gain compared to still image codecs. You can see that HEVC intra-coding is also the highest quality still image codec that is currently available. But in intra-pictures, the gain is a little bit lower than for the case of video. Intra-coding is more challenging. But now subjective performance. What we did is subjective test, some test sequences, non-expert viewers, double stimulus impairment scale methodology, and so here are some examples. We plotted kind of rate distortion graphs, but the distortion is now measured in terms of subjective quality. And what we did then, by the way, here are the confidence intervals, so all this is quite good confidence. And what we did then is we on average, as we are often doing in PSNR, we just compared on average the gain in terms of bit rate. We did this for all the sequences. See, there's some more results. Another one. And on average, we got something like 50% rate reduction for same subject quality. So this is a good indicator, I think, that HEVC is really achieving intended goals. So usually we are saying that a new compression technology in video makes sense if we have roughly half data rate with same quality. In this case of HEVC, I think the improved parallelism is another selling argument, because it's better operating on other processors than you could do this with HEVC. What comes next? We are planning extensions. The current version is only 420 8-bit. Of course, we are going to the full range. This will be one of the first extensions. The first version will be available in January 2013. We are planning for January 2014, 1 year after, to have a full range extensions and also a stereo multi-view extension. What we are currently having open is a call for proposals on scalable technology. Response will be coming in October. So 2014, 2015, we are targeting to have done a scalable framework. Scalability could even mean, this is included in the call for proposals, HEVC base layer HD, HEVC enhancement layer Ultra HD, compatible HD, Ultra HD broadcast servers, for example. And 3D extensions are already targeted as well. We have a second collaborative team on 3D video coding that started working last July and will continue. And I think that's it more or less. I think this has so far been a very successful standardization activity. I hope I gave you some highlights about how it is working and why it is becoming better than what we had previously, or eventually it's just the matter that we better understand what we are doing. Okay, thank you.
Showing the diagram intra-frame estimation.
What is done in intra-frame?
Intra-frame estimation.
Estimation, yeah. This is, as far as I know, but I must say I have not studied the encoder software in detail. It is not checking all the modes. It is reducing it to some of the, at least in terms of block partitions, to some of the more promising ones. Is that answering your question, or otherwise what you could in principle do, you can simply brute force compare all the 33 directional predictions, and then you take the one that is best. But of course all that is done also with rate distortion optimization. You must know how much rate it does cost and how much benefit it gives. So I skipped a little bit quickly over that. For intra-prediction, what is done is a technique for encoding that is using 3 so-called most probable modes. The most probable modes are, in case of directional prediction, the same direction as you can get from the previous prediction unit, plus its closest left and right neighbors. And they are coming at very low rate. They are eventually less than 1 bit, they are context coded, etc. They are the most probable modes. If that fails, you have to explicitly use another 5 bits for signaling which mode it is. This most probable mode is a little bit different when you have a planar prediction or a DC prediction, but I think that would be too much detail. So we are also here using the coherence between adjacent prediction blocks.
So Thomas, a very brief question.
Or not.
Yeah, make it brief.
So the question was on 3D content. Is it how much of an advantage you think you'll see through 3D compression? And then will you also include multi-cameras beyond just 2?
Maybe I skipped a little bit quick over this part. MPEG had a call for proposals last year on 3D video. And proposals were brought in 2 categories. That is what's about video plus depth coding. You could use the depth maps to generate new views at the decoder end, for example, to feed multi-view displays or to make baseline adaptation in conventional stereo displays. And if I would compare for this type of content the proposals that we got in best AVC technology and best HEVC technology for video plus depth, I think the best HEVC technology was roughly 60% less bit rate, so even more than reported here. But that could easily be explained by the fact that the sequences that we used for this call for proposals were simpler. They usually did not have that much of motion, etc. So, but that gives you an idea about that this smooth content, the gain by HEVC may even be larger. And that, of course, applies to 3D. I don't see any reason why the gains that we get should not transfer to 3D as well. And I would guess that HEVC would allow to really encode a multi-view plus depth format eventually with lower rate of single view AVC.
Thank you very much, Jens Runner. Don't run away, please. Please stay here. So I want to thank you on behalf of the organization team and also of the audience with this little present here.